This presentation is a quick synopsis of the book I created titled Milk. West Virginia University created a volunteer program to attend to underprivileged youth, partnering with Americorps. It was the largest of the Americorps programs. It provided funds to local and national organizations as well as agencies committed to using national service to address critical community needs. The program was called Energy Express, and it included tutoring and mentoring disadvantaged youth, fighting illiteracy, improving health services, building affordable housing, teaching computer skills, cleaning parks and streams, managing and operating after-school programs, helping communities respond to disasters, and building organizational capacity. Over the winter, I had translated some ancient Latin and Greek poetry and rewrote it to a modern English version. And then I decided to rewrite it to a more kid-friendly version and maybe create a new American story. I included the interaction with the children and how they responded to it. It was actually a gateway for them to express their trauma in a healthy, diplomatic, and academic setting. These teachings are pushing the brink and leading us into a new age. Trauma and hate should never win. Ignorance is darkness, and I feel as though you should give them light to help them excel in things that they don't understand. The reason that I had called this book Milk was because I understand in life there are things and instances that are extremely hard for us to chew, and I call that meat. And when you are a child or an infant, you have not developed the teeth yet to properly chew the meat. So we are fed milk so we can live and eventually grow to be able to handle the meat of things. So that's the reason for the title. And I was really grateful to be able to experience something like this and create something with these children. And I created personal bonds that will probably live on with me for the rest of my life. So I'm just very grateful that I was able to experience something like this. So as I had stated earlier, the book consists of roughly 45 poems, and I chose to represent this one in a preview because this one is one of my all-time favorites, and it teaches about the unity of every being and how we may have some differences, but at the end of the day, we have more similarities, and we should learn to address that and learn to find unity in our differences and our similarities. So I'm going to read the preview, and I hope you enjoy. This is titled The Veil of Unity. There is wool, there is silk. I enjoy my red and purple scarves. The texture is very cool. I enjoy the warm sheep-haired fleece that resembles milk. One I wear in summer, the other I wear in winter. They could both be worn in spring and fall. I'm grateful for every thread. I enjoy them in different seasons, but I love and need them all. I admire the precious ivory teeth of elephants. I admire the diamond while it's cold. I admire the black and white man. Don't be arrogant. When you put yin and yang together, it makes the circle whole. If a tiger was whole and full, it wouldn't chase the zebra. It could lie down with it and count their stripes together. But because he's starved and empty, my idea makes me sound like a fool. Good thing you can't hear me while you read. It's a joke. Teaching you how to become full, giving every creature what they need. You cannot see the majestic lion run and play freely in the fields while he's in a circus. You cannot see the beauty of spirit because you just see the muddy, earthy surface. But look deep in unity, finally seeing wind, understanding man's purpose. Oh, how I love the smooth purple silk and the warm fuzzy milk like wool. Invite the man from every land, and the feast will have so much food you'll drool. Bring an admiration of unity, then only will you feel full. I admire the hard shell of the crab from the sea. I admire how a soft man from the land loves when he is truly free. With pain and sorrow, you taste the waters like the crab of the sea. With joy and laughter, you're bound to feel warm like the sun that shines brightly. And as it states, there's obviously more, but I didn't want to include the full thing because I would like for you to get the book and read all of it because I feel like there is some depth to this, and why not just go ahead and take a quick dive? This summer, we were told to choose a theme for our room, so I chose the theme Almost Heaven for many different reasons. One of the main reasons was because the state slogan for West Virginia is Almost Heaven. Also, the Latin and Greek poems that I had translated mentioned the Roman Empire, so I decided to include the Roman Empire's aesthetic of what they thought the divine courts looked like. I also decided to include astrology and astronomy because, in some perspectives, that might be the heavens. Also, I decided to include nature because to me, nature personally is a type of sanctuary. So that's what I really wanted to represent to these children, was a sanctuary to come to and to just have an open mind and an open heart, because I feel like that is the best way to learn. Also, I wanted to include a neutral area for us to talk about many different things, many different cultures, everything. And I felt like this was a good representation of what a sanctuary should be. So that's why I chose the theme, Almost Heaven. I decided to choose the sciences as a main focus in my book for many different reasons. One of the reasons being that I had went to school for marine science. Another reason is because on the right there is a student named London. When I interviewed his mother, she was telling me that he had a very passionate interest in insects and that she felt that it made him somewhat antisocial. So I wanted to make sure that we could create something to where everybody could be intertwined together and share the same interests. So that was another reason why I chose this as a focus. Also, London had brought in the microscope. He had received it as a gift from his brother. And for about an hour a day, I would take them outside and then we would go find some specimen, collect things, and we would bring it back in and study the different patterns of the wings and study the different patterns of the leaves. And then I would have them document it scientifically and explain what they saw and the similarities and patterns of the different things we would find. We had found a ruby maple moth and she ended up laying some eggs. We had decided to collect the eggs and study them. Unfortunately, we caused a lot of stress on Ruby, and she ended up losing one of her wings, so we decided to make her a memorial, and also that we would raise her young for her. So I ended up making a little terrarium for her. But it was just nice to see them all bond through science and to see them all have the same curiosity about life. Unfortunately, when Ruby did die, it was very tragic, but it was also a nice thing to teach morally about my teachings of my book, about how there is death and then there's rebirth. So we just continue on with the cycle of life. And it was just a nice way to teach these children the reality of life and teach them the beauty of life as well. So it was summertime, and I understand that the children don't want to be cooped up in a room all summer, so I decided to try to take them out to the greenhouse for at least 30 minutes a day. We would water the plants, go towards the roots, and I taught them the proper way to water. Also, we would study the plants and the different types, like if they were fruit or vegetable. We would sometimes collect specimen to study under the microscope. We would even sometimes snack on the strawberries. I just wanted to include, the natural side of life and the organic side of life, because I feel as though we try to venture towards, the scientific side a lot. I remember when I interviewed London's mother, she had told me that she feels as though he has Asperger's and she doesn't know if she needs to medicate him or not. Me personally, I do believe in, cough medicine, but I don't believe that you should chemically manipulate someone's receptiveness of their brain or block the receptors of their brain, because I also wonder how they can truly feel things. And sometimes conviction is what gets things done. I realize that feeling secures action, and sometimes that is what helps us create our purpose on earth, is feeling. I have read the side effects of medicating children, and I've seen the side effects of grown adults being on medication, and they just don't feel things as normally as they said that they once did when they weren't medicated. So I understand that London's mother is just wanting him to be able to fulfill his potential as a human being, and I understand her concern for him. But this was just another way for me to help London realize that sometimes getting the natural side of life and just going outside and just maybe being around family and friends is just, it might help some things. And I also would have hated to have seen his mother veer towards the medication side, because I also wonder how it could hinder some people's creativity and ability to process life. I understand that the student in front of me, his mother had put him on medication for ADHD, and she said that it was affecting his diet and that he would not eat his food. So when we would go to lunch, I would make sure that I would eat my food. And there was an instance where he didn't feel like eating his bread, and I was like, well, I'll split mine with you if you'll eat the other half, and he ate it. But it's very vital right now for them to be nourished and to have healthy patterns. And Joey's mother ended up taking him off of his medication for the summer because she wants him to enjoy his childhood. So that's why I just wanted to really keep them in an organic set and state of mind, because I feel like that's the most natural way, and that's the way it should be, and that's the way it was intended. So that's why I kept them at the greenhouse a lot of the time. So for musical entertainment, we had a mentor, significant other, come in one day and teach us about the different types of musical instruments from different cultures and the different sounds that they made. He was a music major and was very passionate about it. It was nice to see the children learn about the different tools that you can use to make and create music, and also maybe the diverse sounds that you could create with different instruments. Also, I would have them listen to classical music probably 15 minutes out of the day, and they really enjoyed it, and they really thought it was a very peaceful thing to help them, focus on what they were supposed to be doing. I had one student request Elvis Presley, and I did play it for him one time, but I just really wanted to include the importance of music, because that is something that obviously is very influential in the world. And I also have a student, she's sitting on the floor. She is, she excels in music, and it's just a talent of hers. So I really wanted to make that a main focus of these teachings, just to really make her feel special too in some ways, and really bring out her talents as well. So for one of the lessons that I decided to interpret into these teachings, I decided to include the artist Paul Klee. I really enjoyed his painting called 10 Americans. It was a painting teaching how, we might see one thing, but there are other perspectives. So example, you can see in his original painting, I had to recreate it because I couldn't print out a bigger version of his original painting, but some people see an eye, and I have a brother who works really hard in life, and he said that he saw a bent shovel. Some people said they saw a duck. Some people said they saw a tie. I see some people I've seen say they saw a dancing woman. It's really honestly a way to determine what someone's focus is. And I find it to be pretty accurate, because what these children said that they saw really was a pattern in their personality by me personally knowing them. So I definitely feel like this is a good tool to teach that we all have different perspectives, and maybe it's not always what we see, but obviously there are going to be other things that people see, but I definitely enjoy this because it teaches about the diversity of our journeys. Also, I would like to see public schools trying to really focus on a child's talent. So if they're able to show you what their true focus is, I feel as though you should make them a protege in that one talent. Also, it doesn't hurt to learn other things, but it's just, this would be a helpful tool to parents who don't know what their child's focus is, what they could do, and then, maybe to keep the child away from mischief or away from trouble, try to put them in a focus of what their talent is. So I know in public schools, we have to face the reality of evolution. And I included the scientific version of evolution and the Greek mythology version, and then also the new American version from my book. So in the scientific field, we decided to stick with the language of Latin because French, Spanish, and English all derive from that original language. And in order to keep the confusion down on species and different classifications of pretty much everything, we've decided to stick with the Latin name as the scientific name. So where they got the evolution theory from was the sea mouse, but the scientific name of the sea mouse is Aphrodite. And in Greek mythology, they said that Aphrodite had rose from the sea. And in the American version, I decided to merge it together and say that Aphrodite shapeshifted into the sea mouse. So there's just, a bunch of different theories. But I thought it was fun because it included the reality and the mythological side of life. I felt as though it was extremely important to recognize the first settlers of the land that we now live on. So I definitely made a point to include Native American mythology. And one of the books that I chose was The Legend of the Indian Paintbrush. I tried to teach them how to merge colors together, but it was a fun exercise. I had them take off their shoes and just be free with the paint. I should have probably put down more trash bags. The mess was not fun to clean up, but other than that, they had a blast. They could paint freely, and they just really enjoyed the activity. And it was just something fun to do to make them feel pretty big. When I decided to create the setup, I first introduced it as a game, and I introduced it as we were angels creating a new world for us to go to and to play with. So this was another thing to maybe, help make them feel a little bit like how the Greeks decided to interpret themselves. I also decided to include the Hebrew story of creation. I never really addressed religion, but I do address that book as a piece of literature. So I definitely wanted to include some of the stories from it. I grew up in a church, and I knew a woman who would homeschool people, and there was a woman who came to her church who had lived in a very underprivileged area, and the woman came to her wanting to learn more about life, and the teacher, tested out her reading level and decided to allow her to read the book herself. And then 2 weeks later, she was going to test her to see what reading level she thinks that she should start her out at. Well, after 2 weeks of that woman reading that book, she went from a 5th grade level to an 8th grade reading level. So I feel as though it's extremely important to include those texts in any type of teaching, because it's a powerful book. But this young woman here on the left, she was telling me that her grandmother makes her read the holy texts every night before going to bed, and she shows an extreme advancement in musical ability. So if you're looking to see your child advance academically, I would definitely recommend the Hebrews Guide to Life, because it's pretty enlightening. It's pretty nice to see how far you can advance. Growing up, I was taught proper etiquette, and people think this is an American stereotype, but people think I'm British because of the way that I speak to others. I have just learned that there are other people around me, and that you should always be conscious and considerate of your words, because sometimes it's just not a good way to speak if you're speaking forcefully or with malice. So I've always learned that a good way to get things working is to speak properly. Also, your actions. There are better ways, I feel like, to do things, to be more considerate of others around you. And I just think that manners are a huge help in life. And I think that should be a main focus that children should learn. One of the main focuses that the Energy Express mentors taught us in orientation were graphic organization. They wanted to make sure that these children knew how to organize their thoughts. So I definitely implemented that as a main focus in our activities every day, because it is extremely important. And who knows what you might create? You may just create a book out of it. So definitely it's important. So I definitely see the emphasis on that. So Energy Express provided us with a read aloud book for every week, and they provided us with enough books for the children to take home. So every Friday, I would make it a priority to write poetry into the children's books, and it was something that I don't think only the children appreciated, but the parents appreciated. It's just a little personal touch to let you know that you are definitely trying to be attentive to the child's needs, and to the child's individuality. And also, it's just a good way to uplift somebody. And I had fun writing it. It was fun to express that. So I noticed in school, we definitely focus on the still action of life and biology, but I wanted to focus on the live action side of biology. So I had a student, London, come in, and I had him bring two frogs, and we decided to create a racetrack for the frogs, and I ended up naming one of the frogs Amphibie, to represent the scientific name of a frog, which is amphibian, and Littlefoot, and it helped them to learn the vocabulary of the animal. Also, we built mock beehives and the honey pans. Obviously, no live bees were included in this, but I just thought it would be nice to teach them like the agricultural side of life in a way, how bees make honey and how they work and how you can collect the sweetness from their, hard work. So that was a moral lesson that I tied in with this. So another main focus for Energy Express was to help the children advance in reading, because in the summertime, when you don't use your abilities, you tend to lose your abilities. So that's what happens with a lot of students. And there are some countries who have school year round. America has not offered that as an option, but I do definitely see the advantage of this program, because it's definitely going to help your child become more interested in the academic side of life, which we all know is a very important thing to invest in. But I ran across some people who weren't the best readers. Sasha was extremely advanced, but then London had trouble staying focused. He loved seeing the pictures, but he had a really hard time focusing on the characters of the words. And I talked to his older brother, and his older brother had explained to me that when he reads, his mother yells at him. And I feel as though maybe he's too focused on messing up the words instead of actually focusing on what the words are saying. So I tried to be extremely patient with him, and I made sure to have them pronounce the scientific names and the words they struggled with. I had them write them down, and I told them to take them home, recite it 20 times, write it down 20 times. And I also gave them examples and definitions of the words, and I feel like that helped them learn better. It got them more invested in what they were reading, and it got them to focus more. So now I'm going into the main focus of why I even created this PowerPoint. over the winter, I had ran across some Latin and Greek poetry and translated it to a English version. And I decided I enjoyed the poems very much, but I wanted to make it a little bit deeper. So I rewrote it to a modern version for America, and I decided to make it a more kid-friendly version. So one of the main characters is Aphrodite. She's apparently in 1,000 thrones. She's diverse and immortal, so she decides to help man with her gift, and she transforms into a bunch of different things, but she also has partners and friends help her on her journey. And it's talking about the reemergence of Aphrodite and the different symbols and the different things that she's attracted to. And it's just a fun book, and it was fun to sit here and see the children enjoy it. And it taught them a lot very quickly. So I'm really excited about it. I found a great appreciation, and I was very passionate for it. So I'm excited for others to read it. I decided to not just be biased towards the Greek side. I wanted to include the Hebrew side as well. So the main character of the story is from a different genetic pool, but he's the most important character of the story, and I wanted to include that because I feel as though, you're always hearing about these great conquerors from Rome, but you don't really hear about very many other diverse conquerors. And America is a mixing pot, and it's important that every different striped person has a similarity that they can relate to. So I definitely wanted to make sure that I addressed every culture because I don't want to be insensitive and I don't want to be biased. And each to each his own. Everybody serves a divine purpose, so it's important to include, the truth. So I had purchased these growing animals. I think a lot of people have played with them, but I wanted to emphasize on the importance of metamorphosis and growth. I taught them that everything grows, it just takes time. And sometimes the animals will transform into something completely different that you never thought they would have transformed into. So don't be expectant, and you just never know about anything. So always keep a perspective and keep an open heart, keep an open mind, and you never know what you might find. So I really enjoyed representing, growth to these children through these animals, and they got to take them home, and they were happy, and I think they all had fun. Sasha had a little starfish, and she named it Little Dipper, but she said when it got bigger, she was going to name it Big Dipper. It was just cute to watch. So I wanted to include the Native American, and the Greek mythology that surrounded the community that I was mentoring in. There was a famous resort called the Greenbrier. It was really famous for being the presidential bunker at one point, but it was eventually exposed. But the main attraction to that resort was European settlers first started settling these mountains, and the Native Americans had told them of a spring with healing powers. They decided to take the spring after a Roman custom called the taking of the waters. And the Greek representative on top of the dome in the actual resort is the goddess of youth. Her name is Hebe. And I actually took some water from the well, and I filtered it and boiled it. And when I tasted it, it was the sweetest thing I had ever tasted it. And I don't know if it was because I was fasting or if it was because I just expected it to taste sweet, but it was it was shocking. But I definitely decided to include this in an arts and crafts project because I felt like this was a relevant thing for really a lot of the teachings. And it was just, I don't know, it was just fun to teach and talk about. I also decided to include the importance of linguistics. One of the students I had, his name is Shaden, he has speech problems, but I decided to open up the gateway of him understanding that there are other languages and we all have different pronunciations, and it should never stop you or hold you back from presenting or speaking because if people really want to know, they'll figure it out. But I also decided to teach them, growth in linguistics. And I taught them how Hebrew was originally the first language, and then how the Phoenicians took from the Hebrew alphabet, and then the Greeks took from the Phoenician alphabet, and how Latin came from the Greek alphabet, and then how English comes from Latin. And I just found it to be a holy language, WHOLLY, because it's talking about the whole origin of how we are truly able to communicate and how you're even able to hear me right now. So I felt like that was definitely a fun thing to show them, and they enjoyed it. I also taught them about the Roman Empire and how they ended up becoming a very big power in the world because they roamed, and you can see the word connection. Ata kakama, ata dov, ata kasaka, ata eora. See Eola. I also made sure to emphasize the importance of marriage and the unity that it is supposed to represent. And before somebody starts to get upset at what I've been teaching, I just wanted to make sure that they knew the reality of life and the long-term effects, and how marriage isn't about selfishness. It's about selflessness, and it's about how you can create life abundantly for each other long term. It's an investment. And I also talked about how the importance of unity, because I know now the world that we're living in, it's more about quantity than quality, but long term you're going to want to have something of quality before you have something of quantity, because eventually, if it's made cheap and it breaks easily, you're going to have to keep replacing it. But if it's built strong and has quality, you can keep that one thing for a long period of time. And that's what the reality of life is time. So I just wanted to make sure that these children knew the importance of staying true to a covenant that you form, because long term, it's important. And I don't know if some of these children had that type of example at home. And also I wanted to let them know the importance of the male and feminine or female energy. I had a student talk to me about how her mother was just a mother, and that's sometimes the most important job that a woman can have, or anything can have. If we didn't have mothers, we wouldn't have life. So it's a very important job. And I also informed them about the husbands, how they till the grounds, and how you need that muscle to help, build life. So I just wanted to make sure that they got the reality of life as well. And before someone starts to get angry at me, every Disney movie ever has the unrealistic side of marriage. But also, there were mentors reading books about kisses and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's something that's obviously going to be put into children no matter what. But I just wanted to make sure it was in a safer, more controlled way. And it wasn't a bitter outlook, and it wasn't a, unrealistic romantic outlook either, or a fantasy outlook. It was a outlook about building something together and having a selfless partnership. I created this PowerPoint because I understand a lot of us are always extremely busy with life. But it is a 500-page book, but it's an extremely fast read. A lot of it consists of 45 different poems. And I created this PowerPoint to maybe speed up the process or speed up your interest in it. But also, I don't appreciate divers' lusts because there's so much that we do miss out on because we just want the shallow part of the deal. And I feel like you can truly learn and truly see fruits applied and come from your garden when you dig deep and till the ground. So I'm a computer science major, and I learned of a man named Robert Boole who had a fifth grade education, and he created a philosophy based off of true and false statements, which is called Boolean logic. And he decided to state that if you have a true statement, the output will be 1. You'll have something. But if you have a false statement, the output will be 0. You'll have nothing. So that's why it's always important to tell the truth. Anyways, they laughed at his theory, but 100 years later, they used his theory for the basic fundamentals for binary coding, which is 0, 1. So, like I said, you never know what you're going to create. I think we all plant seeds and they grow into something bigger, but this is definitely something that I feel like is a stepping stone for our future, if only we want it to be. So one of my favorite things that this program offered was an insight on community service. So one of the first things we did was we weeded a flower bed and spread mulch. We painted a daycare. We cleaned out an old rec center that could be recreated to use for future students. It was an old abandoned school, and we painted it, and we had taken a break, and one of the girls and I had went on an adventure and started exploring the building, and we came across a library. And when we came across the library, there were some old books in the library, and there was old Italian literature, and there was some beautiful poetry in it. And that was one of the treasures that I hold on to dearly from this experience. I didn't take the book with me, but I did take a few photographs of the poems, and it was just nice to read that and to see that. It was fun for me.